Well, hi, Michael, buddy.
Hello, hello.
So you have produced some phenomenal playlists for Dance Church. Do you want to give us a little bit of your musical background?
First of all, thank you for that compliment. Sure, my musical background is something, I am a professional musician. That's my latest mantra. But I like to feel that my musical training began when I was in utero. My mother was a music student and in college when I was being grown there, and she's a flautist and pianist, still is. So, I was exposed to all kinds of music in the womb, like from Beethoven to the Beatles to Santana, all the way around. But as soon as I had dexterity in my fingers, I've got pictures of me at like 8 months old sitting at a piano. So it's always been there. I played piano as a young person, and then switched to percussion. That's where my actual formal musical training is in percussion. And then I think it was about midway through high school. I noticed all the glory was going to the guitarists, so traded in the drums for the guitar. But since then, my musical abilities have really expanded. It was actually at an ecstatic dance. Someone played a didgeridoo after dance, and I thought, wow, that was really amazing. And my grandfather had come back from Australia in the early 2000s and brought didgeridoos for everyone in the family. And we tried them one night, we all sat around, tried it. Couldn't do much. I'd been to Australia early in high school. I sort of remembered. I remember the didge from pretty much just from Crocodile Dundee and Xavier Rudd, listening to Xavier Rudd. So the didge, I know story's dragging on already. The didge, it really spoke to me, and I thought, well, maybe I can find a class how to play. And of course, being San Diego, I found a class how to play the didge. And the first time I made a drone, put my lips to it, totally changed everything. I was on this kind of musical trajectory and it just went bloop. So since then, it's just completely changed. And I added didge and flutes and chimes and monochords. I build a lot of instruments now. But what my main musical kind of focus is guiding sound journeys, which relates to the playlist creation because it's a journey where just through using sound as a meditative technique, we can really transcend the body, transcend this kind of dimension of reality and have a completely incredible experience and then come back to it all just using sound, which is the same way that I view the ecstatic dance experience in ecstatic dance playlists. So that was kind of a long answer, but that's
Yeah, no, no, but I want to drill more into that now. Your philosophy of the dance journey, and
got it.
so yeah, so you see this as sort of a break from like a journey outside of reality and into what an ethereal, deeper spiritual space. What kind of how would you describe it?
Yeah, so for me personally, it's a transcendent experience for me. So when I'm in the dance, and if the journey is constructed well, the playlist or the music is constructed well, whether I'm dancing with a partner or just on my own, at some point, just like any meditation, I'm very focused on it and surrendering, and then I transcend. I'm gone. There's no more of this body. There's no more of this gender. There's nothing, and it's almost like I want to say a higher dimensional experience, but it's just a different plane of reality. Just a different plane of reality. Something similar to what we experience in the psychedelic journey or in a meditative journey or a sound journey or a drum journey or a sweat lodge or something like that. Which, for us as a human society goes back to our shamanic days where we gathered in groups and had beating drums and didgeridoos, two of the oldest instruments on the planet, and then you include the flute, and this huge ecstatic experience goes on for hours, and we transcend and we communicate with, the didgeridoos used in ceremony to pierce the veil between realms and view Jacob's ladder. That's the traditional use for the Aborigines, and they communicate with ancestors, they communicate with angels and demons and all kinds of deities. And it's very much the same way. That's the same way I view the ecstatic experience of the playlisting. And
Hmm.
so for me, it's very interesting too, because music is such a big part of my life. I mean, from the time meditation's finished in the morning, the music goes on. And I even listen to music as we go to sleep. So it's all day. I think Spotify said last year that I listened to 100,000 minutes of music between February and November. But, related to playlists, that's important. Music discovery is important in understanding, not only understanding conceptually, but feeling wise, like emotionally, how music works and affects you. I mean, we all notice it. Maybe, I'm sorry, we don't all notice it, but if someone has a moment of anger, they put on some metal or hard rock, and it can either feed that or help dissipate it. So it's you know what did Bugs Bunny always say? That music soothes the savage beast, right? He plays the music, and the big monster calms down.
Right.
So it's very much like that. Yeah.
I often have in like sort of intuitive moments where I'm sort of to hear the lyrics of a song or the tune of a song in my usually it's the tune of a song in my head and it's just like what I'm feeling that and I may never have heard the lyrics of that or really cognitively remembered the lyrics of that song before and then I start playing it and I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm going through. I didn't, somehow subliminally I understood the lyrics and the whole song, and it's exactly what I'm feeling now.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a beautiful moment when that happens. Right now, I'm flashing back to like my early teens, like all the specifically like the Violent Femmes album. That tape, I wore that tape out for certain. But yeah, very much like that.
So maybe we could start with the do's and don'ts of a dance church playlist, or we could just, if you run it, rather just go right into the form and the function.
Yeah, so I actually have a link that I'm going to share here with you. Okay, so this is a great resource for people. So instead of kind of like do's or don'ts or anything, it's important, I feel, to understand what the phases of the ecstatic dance journey are. And this is Ecstatic Dance Records. They're on Spotify, as you can see up here, and they've got some pieces that are like examples of arrival songs, build up, peak, cruise. So, excuse me, when we talk about the ecstatic experience, I mean, this is lays it out right here. So
Can you just,
arrival,
yeah, describe
what?
the arrival a little bit?
Yeah, so arrival, it's interesting because some people in our group don't like it when there's a very slow introduction to the playlist and then, maybe some classical music or flutes, but arrival is important so we can shed off the energy of whether we're driving there, how we get there, even just walking up to the dance floor. It's in meditation, a lot of techniques use the breath to, excuse me, come into the body and just settle. And this is very much the same thing with the arrival at the dance. So it includes walking up, but it's the first part of the set. You're arriving in this sacred space for this next 2 hours. And this part of the journey is meant to hold you, welcome you in, kind of, okay, I think of it as holding a baby, just slowly beginning to come into the space.
And it says here that it's sort of setting the container. It's making people feel safe in the space and or welcome, awake, or bringing them. If their bodies weren't awake when they arrived, maybe it's bringing them into their bodies.
Exactly. And when you experience a really well-crafted set, even if you get there 5 minutes late, if you walk in and there's like 108 per minute, house floor filler going, your whole dance, you start off like that.
Or you
Uh,
turn around and you leave.
exactly. You're like, oh, this is not my place today. I'm gonna go that way. So this, for me, I'll kind of mix in, working with the playlist too. So in these moments, like arrival is good for really slow, flowy pieces. I like to mix in some classical pieces sometimes at the beginning. Native American flute pieces or bansuri flute is really good to use here. Like classical pieces or flute pieces or more ethereal pieces that really just kind of, they slowly come in. So one thing that I do as we go through this is I make an actual list of my playlist as I'm doing it. So these go through, I usually go through about maybe 10 iterations of a single playlist before I hand it in. Some playlisters they hand it in, they send it in, and then they continue tweaking it. But I'm kind of I'm different in that I send it in when I feel it's finished, and I don't touch it or even listen to it until the day of the dance. I like to build pressure on myself. I don't know. So one thing that I do, so what I do is I have, and I'll share this, like I said, I'll scan it, is the title of the track, the length of the track, so how many minutes it is, the timing, and then the phase, what we were just talking about. So the timing is, as you can see, we start at 11 for Dance Church. So I feel it's important for me to know where we are in the set in the 2 hours, because it's a limited window, 2 hours. And then I've got phase here, arrival. So I've got 2 arrival songs. So, and then the other thing I do is as I'm going along, I kind of mark in the energy of the set, and we'll get to more of this. So you can see the arrival is kind of flat, and then it starts to build up. And that's, if you're thinking about dance or any exercise, I mean, if you go to the gym, most people don't just go in and start, bench pressing a lot of weight. Your body needs time to warm up, and part of dance is movement. I mean, that's a big part of it. So,
Jim, you might do a few crunchies or walk on the treadmill for
walk, yeah,
5 minutes before you start running or doing weights.
yeah, and even like I mentioned, meditation. You start with maybe the form of meditation I do. I start with about 5 minutes of just breathing before I really get into the deep part. So there's another factor that I keep in mind is our community. And I think that's kind of that's an important aspect of creating these playlists. And I've noticed this kind of anecdotally in the closing circles that when we bring in or when we use playlists made from DJs elsewhere, the majority of people are like, well, it didn't really hit for me there or do this for me. And that's one of the beauties of the ecstatic experience. If you go to ecstatic dance, it's an interplay between the DJ and the dancers. We're all creating it together. And with creating playlists for Dance Church, we're a community. We've been doing this together for a long time. So we know each other and we know the experience. And one thing that I take into consideration, like if I'm making a playlist for the park, I know that many people don't get there until quarter after, sometimes even 20 after. So my arrival sequence might be a little longer, so that when someone's walking up, it's not this, 140 beat or 180 beat floor filler. Whereas in the studio, it's kind of that closed container, so the arrival might be a little shorter because people are there a little earlier, or there's a contact class before, so sometimes I like to flow it if I know it's going to flow right into that. So arrival, again, this arrival on this playlist, which was my last one, I've got arrival going for 9 minutes or so. So the 9-minute arrival sequence. This was in the studio. So that one, and this one had a very slow, even I've got a little note here, it says nice opening. And this one started with a classical piece and then went into a soundscape that had had forest sounds and more of a slow Indian or Middle Eastern feel to it with some sitar and some Urdu and some other stringed instruments. So stringed instruments are pretty good at the beginning because it's nice flowy. You can really get into it, or however you start off your dance. So from arrival we go into build up, which is exactly what it sounds like. So sometimes I like to call build up move. Like I'll have maybe 1 or 2 songs of moving. So for me that's more of a transition between the initial arrival and the build up. Again, so if someone's walking up a little later, it's not too in their face or like, oh, I've missed it. I'm so late. I'm not going to be able to get into dance or something like that. So maybe I'll put 1 or 2 move songs in there, which are just a little bit faster. Maybe they bring in some percussion, some light percussion. But then we get into the build-up. As you can see, it says peak after that. So build-up, we're building up to that peak. And these songs start to get faster because you don't want to necessarily just jump right up. Again, you can see, let's see, for this one I've got 20 minutes of build up before we even get to a peak. So it's kind of a slow build, but What you want to do is you want to build, you're crafting a story, you're crafting a sonic experience, a sonic story. And I was thinking about this last night, and for me and many Gen Xers is the art of making the mixtape, especially seeing as we just came by Valentine's Day. So, you know, you have a crush, you make a mixtape for them back in when analog was not retro, it was nowtro. And I was thinking of a quote in the film High Fidelity, which is a great film.
One of
Anyone who
my
wants to see it.
favorites.
Yeah. It's at the end, and John Cusack's character says he's talking about making a mixtape for his longtime partner. He says, the art of making a mixtape is you want to start off, you want to grab their attention, but you don't want to give them everything right away. And it's very much so. I used to make so many mixtapes, but it's the same kind of thing. You're building up. And one of the interesting things is that when I view new releases by artists, like albums, it's kind of different now, but I always felt that when an artist released an album, their best song was usually track 5 or 6. It wasn't necessarily track 1, you know, Nirvana aside, but it's usually like track 5 or track 6 is the peak of the record. You're building up and it's like, finally, oh my gosh, we're here. And then, you know, you come out and they put the ballad at the end or something like that. So very much the same thing. This one, like I said, I've got 20 minutes of build into this playlist.
First peak. So then the first peak is maybe 30 minutes into the playlist.
This one hits, the first peak hits at 11:29. Exactly right. Yeah, on this one. So then we get to peak, right? And peak can mean a couple of different things. Catharsis and climax, right? So this can be a really driving song, like super heavy kick bass and high energy, 240 beats per minute. Or sometimes what I do is put in an emotional peak song. And this goes back to knowing our community, right? I know the people quite well. I know that, oh, this song, maybe because of the lyrics or the time period it's from, will really resonate emotionally. Because again, we're creating an emotional journey. It's just not going to a club, right? And that's sometimes I have an issue with maybe the ecstatic dance. I'll come home and I'll describe, well, it was a little too clubby for me. Because then it's just like, oh, I'm just playing this song and I'm playing this popular song, as opposed to I'm flowing it, I'm moving it through, which is an important aspect that I almost forgot is transitions. And transitions between songs can almost, I feel, ruin a playlist that has a lot of good song selections. Like very recently, there was a playlist that had a lot of very interesting song selections and different kinds of music, which is wonderful. But the transitions, they just didn't miss. And what I mean by transition is one song flows into the other. So one of the beauties of Spotify is it takes away the need to work faders as a DJ. And in general, I'd say the general rule is you can set your crossfade, you set the crossfade between 8 and 12 seconds. My sweet spot personally is 10 seconds. So that way, like some of the Arrival songs fade out slowly. And even when I compose pieces, I fade them out very slowly, which could be annoying for DJs as you're trying to mix things. And then there's this, all of a sudden, there's this silence. And while sometimes you can use silence within a playlist, it's generally not something you want, because what happens when in the ecstatic experience is people, especially with the headphones on at the park, people are paying so much attention to the music that sometimes it drives their dance. So the silence comes and you look around and everyone has stopped moving, which can be, if that's your intention, go for it. But if it's kind of like a dropout where there's silence and then you come into another song, and I feel that what happens there is the energy of the first song dissipates, and then the second song, while it maybe had meant to kind of come in like this, it does this, kind of more like this. So it's like, and then you have to build up again. So just paying attention to transitions is hugely important. And a lot of times my playlist building is centered around transitions. And when I feel like I've created a great playlist, is because of the transitions. And I'll mark for another list here. Sometimes I'll mark down and take notes between songs like great transition, rough transition, and that will drive me. If it's a rough transition, I'll probably end up throwing one of the songs out to make sure that that really is seamless and it's achieving what my intention was for the playlist.
And what makes a transition seamless?
Good question. Good question. So actually, to that end, I've got another website to share to help people. But a good transition, the best transition is when you don't notice the transition. You don't notice that it's a different song, and that can be related to it's in the same key or it's in a complementary key. It starts off with the same tempo, but the transition should just move through. I mean, it's like this. You're going like this. It's this one song ends, and then here comes a transition, and I've done that, and I'm into the next part of the thing.
So it's more about your body actually feeling the movement going, oh, that felt good.
Yeah,
That felt like a good move from this song to this song in my body.
absolutely. Thank you for offering that because I'm speaking very technically about these playlists, but it's also very emotional. So if it doesn't feel good, if that transition doesn't feel good, I mean, if you listen to it, you can really feel it. So when I'm building a list, most of my time is spent in the last 15 seconds and first 15 seconds of each song. Just listening to that transition over and over again. I'll put the list together, I'll start moving things around, and I'll listen to the first 15, 20 seconds of the song, and then I'll fast forward it to the last 15 to make sure the transition goes. Yeah, to the point where I've listened, Spotify will tell me at the end of the year, oh, you're a super fan of this song. You listened to 35 times on March 15th. Yeah, 'cause I was listening to the last 20 seconds of it. But to that end, for people who may need help figuring these things out, there's this great site called TuneBat. And you can see here, we'll just go with Lady Gaga because she knows what she's doing. So you can search any song, and it's got great things like shows you how much energy this song has, the danceability, and it's got this Camelot system which people can read about it if they're really interested in it. It's a way to it's kind of like a color wheel, 11A if it's 11B and 10C. But the great thing about this site, it says it's got recommended for harmonic mixing. So you can see here, you got the Lady Gaga song, and then their acoustic song is good to mix with it. I don't know if you want to do that, but okay. It'll give you suggestions. So if you're stuck and you don't know, like, oh, is this a good transition? What's a better song? This will give you a whole slew of songs that you can go through and try and fit.
And just to give people an idea of, since we're seeing the key suggestions here, if people don't know enough about the technical side of music, like an F sharp minor key matches really well with an A major key because it's got many of the same notes in it. The F sharp is in the A major scale, and so these are keys that are relatively similar, and it won't sound like a huge change of key to the ear.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. Unless, of course, you're going for that giant change, which is
Right.
also sometimes a technique. But again, that comes to feel. So this site is, like I said, if you're feeling stuck and if you're not quite sure, and just like you said, so we got the F minor, we got A major, a lot of F minor, they got B minor, got C sharp minor. So they're all in that family. This is, I'm not sure what that was, but this is a great site to use, especially when you get stuck. So to that end, the other thing I mentioned the Spotify thing is if you want to build playlists, I highly recommend listening to a lot of music, which comes naturally for me as a musician because I'm always trying to hear different things and be influenced by different stuff. And Spotify, the algorithm, that's a big word these days and often viewed as something nefarious, can be very useful. and it can suggest and kind of point you in directions for discovering new music. I've discovered so much new music on through Spotify, through the algorithm, because you can basically program it. If you listen, I often offer to people like listen to the Yoga Electronica playlist on Spotify. It's generated by them, but it's got a lot of songs that appear in Dance Church playlists over the years. I mean, there's songs in that playlist that have been I can remember from 7+ years ago. But one thing that Spotify does is at the bottom of playlists, it'll say, oh, based on your listening, we recommend these songs. And then it'll start to populate, other music services do this too, but it'll start to populate your made for Andrew playlist. Here's a chill mix, here's a house mix, and you can just listen to those and listen. And when you hear something, save it to a playlist. So I name all my playlists flow because that's how I feel they flow, and the dance is a flow. That's how it is. I've got one playlist that's called Flow Holding. It's my repository. I hear a song and I'm driving, I'm doing this, or I'm running inside to change it and put it on the playlist. That playlist has like probably, I don't know, 900 songs in it right now of all different kinds. Classical, it's got house beats, it's all kinds of stuff that whether I hear something and say, oh, that would make a song for dance. Or if it's just like, oh, that's interesting, just throw it in there. So keep building those things and keep exploring, because variety is very important when you're building these playlists too. So sometimes in the build section, I call it like sneaking in a song. Maybe I'll put an R&B song in there, or again, a little pre-peak emotional song. One time I put an Outcast song in there, just like kind of a little randomly. It fit in the transitions. People really connected with it. It's like, oh, I haven't heard this song in forever. You can see them moving and dancing on the floor. And moving and dancing, that's the other important thing when you're building these. I'll build a playlist, put it aside for 2 days, and then I'll dance to it. I'll put it on a speaker in the room, and I'll dance to it for the whole playlist. And then you can feel like, that section doesn't work. I was bored over here. This got me really excited, so on and so forth. Which is important to know where the peaks are. So as we mentioned, this first peak hit about 11:30, and then following peak, we've got what is called, I'm getting my window back here, we've got the cruise. If you think about the peak, in this playlist, it was a cover of a Chili Pepper song of Give It Away, right? So it was an upbeat song. It had a driving rhythm. It was a new version of it, so maybe more people could connect with it. It was an emotional peak because some of us going back to the 90s and, we connect with that song emotionally. It was a big hit. So you bring everyone to a peak. You've got your arrival, you've got a build up. We've been building up for 20 minutes. The energy is building, the emotion is building, people are having experiences and they maybe need a release at some point. So we've got the peak, it goes kaboom. And then in the ecstatic experience, after the peak, we call it the cruise, where we hold that emotional state. So in this playlist, this cruise is kind of short, but you can see this flat spot on top of the wave here. Generally speaking, cruise songs will be about the same tempo as the peak, and it's meant to just keep you moving. I mean, you want to keep going. It's like you hit that point of ecstasy and it lasts for, the peak here is 3 minutes and 24 seconds, like ecstatic moment. Let's not end it, let's keep it going, let's maintain it for another, that was a 5-minute cruise. So there's 8 minutes of high intensity, high emotion, transcendent experience. And the build peak cruise is kind of the meat and potatoes, which is an interesting analogy for a vegan to give, but well, the beyond meat and potatoes of the playlist. So in a 2-hour playlist, I've repeated that 3 times. So we've got build, peak, cruise, build, peak, cruise, build, peak, cruise. which spread out. The first peak hits at 11:29, second peak hits at noon. So that was kind of a short time. And then this time the third peak hits at 12:30. So they're spaced about a half hour each. And again, that depends on, this is where the personal, I mean, really personalization. Do you want that cruise to be 12 minutes long? There's nothing that says you can't do that. But again, coming back to knowing the community, if you think about, well, I want a 12-minute cruise. Okay, are people going to be tired? Because if everyone gets tired, especially in the park, all of a sudden the dance area is empty and people are laying down, which is not a judgment. It's just that this is meant to keep, this is a dance playlist. So
If the majority of the dancers were in their early 20s, you would design it very differently for much longer
yeah,
cruises because they're just like, yeah, I need to get all this energy out.
right. You go to an Ecstatic on Friday night and the peak hits, and then there's maybe two cruises song, and then when there's what we call an echo peak within that, there's something at maybe 180 beats per minute, and that maintains for another two songs of 10 minutes, and then you stick like a 240 beat per minute or something crazy, and that's the echo peak. So it's even like ah, and people, a lot of screaming and yelling and stuff like that, which can work. It can work at dance church. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it for your first peak at like at 11:30, where maybe people are still walking up. But that's a way to do it. So for me personally, especially after the first peak, I used to view the first peak sometimes too for dance in the park. Sometimes I used to move it a little earlier. I still do it for the people such as yourself, Andrew, who come to hold space and set up, who have been there already for 45 minutes by the time that peak hits. So it's kind of like I view it as a gift or a special thing that if you came on time or if you were there already, you've got this lovely emotional peak kind of a little earlier than normal, maybe before some other people get there, which is another little aspect about knowing the community. Sometimes, admittedly, I'll put in songs like, oh, so and so would love this song, and it'd be great to dance with them during this song. So I'll do that. I'll stick little things in there where I have someone in particular in mind or something like that, or knowing that, oh, everyone will, they'll circle up, we'll circle up, or something like that will happen. Not trying to control too much, but at least like introducing that intention into it, like, oh, this would really get everyone together. So build peak cruise, very important. And then what I personally like to do, especially after the first peak, is I put in what's called the drop right there, and you can see it, how it's peaked, and then all of a sudden it goes all the way back down almost to the level of the arrival. There's a couple reasons I do that. First is to literally give everyone a rest, especially if that peak has been super charging, super emotional. There's been a lot of release, there's been a lot of movement. If it's like a heavy drum beat driven song, I'll definitely put in a really big drop. Just kind of give everyone a moment to settle. Usually the drops that I use are very emotional songs. Like this one is My Lover's Prayer by, my mind is blank, but not Otis Redding. Marvin Gaye. Yeah, I mean, who's that guy, right?
Who's that guy?
Never heard of him. Never heard of him. It's My Lover's Prayer by Marvin Gaye, which is a very slow song, and the lyrics. So in the drops is where I like to stick in songs with lyrics, because generally at dance, personally, songs with too many lyrics I find a little distracting, because my experience is transcendent. So this earthly voice going is sometimes like, well, so that
Pulling you
drop
back
moment.
into your head, pulling you back into your thinking
Exactly.
brain instead of your feeling body.
Perfectly said. Thank you. So, that's a chance to stick in those things. And again, My Lover's Prayer, right? We'd call that soul. That'd be a soul song, which usually if you experience that in a dance situation, it's been remixed with some heavy drum and bass beat behind it, right? So this is kind of a pure thing. And it brings the energy down because we go back to that build, right? Build, peak, cruise. So if you're cruising and then you only come down a little bit, your next build, it's not going to feel the build. It's just going to be one continuous mass. In some situations, it might work, but our community, we're not spring chickens anymore, so we need these little rest points. I do at least, right?
But
We've
also
had,
to your point that it's just the contrast isn't as big. And so if you don't settle down into this like somber, soft, kind of, gentle, like, grounded place, then the next peak just isn't gonna pull you as much into your experience. It's gonna just and that can deflect people out of the dance too, or they just either physically getting tired or emotionally they're just not feeling as deep of an experience.
yeah, yeah, and thank you for saying emotionally because that's the most important thing. I said a few physical things and, almost jokingly, but it's more importantly that the emotional aspect is really highlighted and I would even say targeted, right? When we go to a film, if we go see a film or read a book, we want that up and down, that roller coaster, the best films, Oscar-winning best drama. It was a roller coaster of a ride because we went up and we were way down and then we slowly built. It's not just, that's kind of monotone. So what I'll do is I'll have a drop and then I'll have reset. And this reset
Mm.
song is a particular one was Ben Harper's song. It's just him on a guitar, accompanied by a djembe, and it starts off kind of with a slow beat, but then I know we're going back into a build. So by the end of the song, the tempo has picked up a little bit, and again, it follows a drop. It's a reset, so it's another opportunity to put in something with lyrics so people connect emotionally. So this song, so we go from My Lover's Prayer, which talks about loss and love and devastation. And then the Ben Harper song comes on, and it's called Burn One Down. He's talking about how he goes through life and that, he's about to burn one down. He's about to smoke a joint, and if if you're judging him, then that's your problem. He says, I don't, in the song, it's like, I don't care how you live your life. I love you for it. You should hopefully do the same for me. So we get that emotional thing where we're building up like, yeah, we're all in this together. We're in this big community right here. We're all dancing together and this unites us. So then we go from there back into the build. And for this one, make sure yeah, okay. So this one, we go from burn one down, and then I went into, which can sometimes be iffy, I went into another piece that was drum centered. So it's all like the djembes and different African drums, but we're going back into a build. So here's burn one down, Mother Lover's Prayer at the low point, and we start to come back up again. And then we've got 16 minutes of build to the next peak. And again, it's just repeating that pattern, but not necessarily repeating the same kinds of songs. So sometimes people will notice like, oh, I felt the playlist was in two halves. Like there was the first half and then it suddenly drastically changed, which is good because then they're engaged. The playlist is moving. It's not just where it's just like, oh, we got there and then suddenly it was the end of the day and I didn't know what happened. So there's a couple ways we do that, right? I mentioned it at the arrival. It's good to maybe use classical pieces or flute pieces or slow, ethereal songs that have binaural tones in them or washing synthesizers. And then we're coming into some songs like some of these early ones that I've got here have some lo-fi beats, so it's not too, it's not hitting you too hard, but it's still making you move and you can feel it. And then right before this peak, I've got I Chico, which is kind of a reggaeton song. So it kind of builds up. It's got some drums in there. And then we've got the peak, the cruise. And then we've got our drop, where we've got a soul song. And then Ben Harper with the djembes and stuff. And then I've got the next set of drums coming in. So the type of music needs to evolve along with the playlist, as I just mentioned, right? So we get the kind of the slow arrival, which is just generally speaking going to be a certain group of instruments. Then we've got the first build where it makes you want to move, but maybe it's not like right away. You're not running into to spin class or something. You're on the recumbent bike at the gym, and you're slowly coming into it. So the middle portion here has got a lot of drum stuff, and this is interesting because for this playlist I had two songs that I identified that I wanted to build it around. That was my intention. And those two songs are the second and the third peak. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes you'll hear one song like, that's my centerpiece. That's so this particular, yeah, this one had the two songs that I really, really wanted to use as my centerpieces. And they're both songs by actually the same artist, which I try not to do ever, but couldn't help myself. It's a group of Native Americans from South Dakota, and they do a lot of remixes, and they bring in some of their chanting from their groups, and they have other indigenous artists come in. But it's really like driving beat, and then you get the emotional aspect of having music from First Nation members. For me, it was like, yeah, I have to build it around these two. So that's what I did. So that's what drives like bringing a lot of the drums into this second section, right? We've started with the red clay earth, which is all African drums, and then Highland step. And so there's a lot of other like driving beats. So the beats are picking up. Maybe there's a little bit more electronic aspect to it. It's starting to really drive you and pick you up. And then when we get to that second peak, and kaboom, we're there. We cruise again, and then another reset. This particular case, the reset was like a sitar-focused song. So it was kind of flowy, but it also had tablas in it, which are more finger percussion. They can get really fast, but it's nice movement, slow, because I know that we're coming into the final build. So, this is the last peak we're going to get here, I believe. Yeah, the last peak. And we've got 18 minutes of build on that final ramp up. Now, you can see there's a lot crossed out there, and sometimes this will happen. We're on the second page. After my notes of, these songs feel odd, this doesn't work, and then there's a new section that's made that's part of that playlist. But again, that comes from listening to it over and over again. Maybe I'll listen to it while I'm working in the shop, and then I'll come in and I'll dance to it, and like that transition doesn't work. Yeah, so again, transitions. It says here, good, great transition into Baptismo, though it's odd enough. Yeah, so what? Go ahead.
So other people might just do all of this on Spotify without necessarily writing it out, right?
Yeah.
But you write it out because it helps you clarify what's going on, and then you can make your notes.
Yes. It also helps because remember the timing that I put in there. I know that last peak is at 12:30 to 12:35,
right?
And then we're at 12:40, and then by 12:40 I know, okay, well, we've got 20 minutes left. We've been going, this has been a really high energy, high emotional dance list or playlist. So we're going to need some time for, this is a great transition to that, thank you. Time for landing, right? So there's two different, the ecstatic dance people, they call it landing. I've got a different kind of wording for it, but at any rate, it's this part. It's the down slope of the whole experience. We're coming down.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is, so here's a great example of manipulating the phases. So we've got peak and cruise here at the last ones, right? This is the last peak. It's at 12:30 to 12:35, and then the next the cruise goes on from 12:35 to 12:40. But because I've been writing it down, and this comes over from the days of making tapes. I used to write them out before actually committing to the tape, so I don't have to go back and forth. So then I want to cruise, 2 more cruise songs. So it's actually a 3-song cruise. We got the peak, and then I know we're chugging to the end, and this last cruise finishes at 12:46, so 12:45. And as you move through making these lists and you learn which venue your list is going to be in, if you know ahead of time, this is going to be in the park, this is going to be so-so. Again, this is sort of anecdotal, but it's just my observations. Long slow down, so I'll have cruise, I'll have slow down, cool, and land instead of just landing. Because landing for me, and this comes to my offerings at dance too, landing for me means I'm up next. I'm going to be playing the didge after this last song because the dance, the transcendent portion is open, is finished. We've landed, and now for me, I'll be bringing the didge to bring us back, if we're still stuck in that realm a little bit, to bring us back to earth proper. So what I do is I like to do slow down, cool down, and land. So after a 3-song cruise, which is basically almost a 4-song peak, right? Peak, cruise, cruise, cruise. Slow it down a little bit. This one was an artist from West Africa, and it was kind of a longer song, but it started off like with this kind of made up wind sound and oceany sound. And the transition from the last cruise song into that worked so perfectly. And sometimes you'll find that if you're paying attention to transitions, there'll be 2 songs that if you listen to them separately, you're like, these would never go together. But that transition, whether you manipulate it between 8 seconds and 12 seconds, is just so perfect. Maybe it's because the key is so, meshes well, or it's because we just came off a 4-song peak where we're like this, and then, oh my gosh, I feel like the ocean's washing over me. But back to my point before I started rambling.
I really like that. By the way, I feel like I want to explore that though, like the ocean, like the drop off, right? The drop off from a cruise. As a dancer, I've often experienced that. It's like it's like I'm literally a little bit tired and emotionally like like at a breaking point deliberately, right? And and then sometimes it doesn't like fade into something with a similar rhythm. It's like literally just like emptiness with no rhythm, and I'm just like, and I feel like I'm floating on the dance floor
Yeah,
while still on my feet. I'm just like it's like I'm literally just falling back onto a cushy cloud bed in the music so that I can feel and just sort of process what I've just gone through.
gone through. Perfect. Thank you so much for that because right at this point when we're hitting slow down, we've been on a journey where we're doing this just like in the ocean. And maybe I often tell people, I mean, this one is very wave-like. This energy is very almost like sine waves there. Normally, my playlist, I live out in the mountains, right? So normally it's like looking out the window at the mountain range and it's doing this and it's getting a little higher and then it suddenly drops off. So to what you're saying, like this whole experience, especially by the time I get to slow down after those cruises, is like, we've gone on this roller coaster, literally, and being held in that like this, right? I'm your dance partner, I'm holding you, and I'm just kind of, okay, we're floating down to the bottom. And yeah, that is just so significant and important because it's a journey, it's a flow. It is that flow. Otherwise it's just songs. It's just plain songs. Might as well put it on random. Put a bunch of songs in a list and hit random and hope for whatever. So, being aware, being cognizant of that. And I think for me, having the list, writing it out physically helps with that because I can see it puts a visual aspect to it. Right? I can see that this peak was way up here and we've had a lot of peaks way up here. Whereas, if you have the ability to do it in the app, more power to you. You can get lost in there. You're easily lost. You're moving things around, and maybe you spend more energy on one section, and it happens. So that slowdown, and what I've noticed, again, anecdotally, is in the park. If the slowdown and cool down is too long, people will be on their blankets. If you started at like 20 at 11:40, by 11:48 people are on the blankets and no one's on the floor. Maybe 1 or 2 people are moving, which is fine, but you still may have something to say in the playlist that might be missed, or could be, it's tough to put expectations in there, but we have the intention, right? And the intention is that as the end comes, I'm trying to bring you back slowly into your body, but your body is still moving as if it were connected. Well, it is connected to that transcendental place, but it's like the corporeal body's there, and I can see the spirit body coming in like this, and then yeah, slow down. It's moving together, and then it's cooling down, and then on the phases, the ecstatic, we talk about integration, which is important for any journey, whether it is meditation, sound meditation, psychedelic work. Integration is just beyond important. Beyond important. It's more important than the psychedelic journey itself, is the integrating of it. So here we're integrating the spirit back into the body. And, so we come in, we slow down, we cool down, we land. That's the integration piece for me. Those three aspects: slow down, cool down, land. So slow down might be, again, this one had some more beats to it, and you're kind of moving. Maybe your movement's a little faster. Maybe you're in a contact jam with someone, and you're still putting pressure on each other. And then you get to the cool down, which in this song, this list was "Be Here Now" by George Harrison. Which, it's George Harrison, so I mean, come on. Be Here Now, right? It's his tribute to Ram Dass and being here now in this moment. And it's a very emotional song. The lyrics are important. So the cool down phase is like, okay, I'm feeling this. And sometimes if you observe people with your playlist playing and you're at the cool down and it's this kind of song, you'll see someone standing there just, maybe weeping or just swaying and static, but being here now, right? That's kind of it. And then the landing is structurally, the landing song is similar to the arrival song. It's wrapping, it's tying it together. We've come full circle. I mentioned the shamanic society, right? We also gather in the circle. The journey is sometimes the circle, not in perfect circle, it goes like that, but back to the beginning. And for our group, right, we've got the didgeridoo after, so getting them closer to the ground, maybe. I think in this particular playlist, it was Native American flute, and it was just the flute, no other accompanying instruments in it. Excuse me, that encourages people to enter savasana, so enter lying on their back, or however they feel that comes on to them. And that's probably the song that holds us the most, because that's when the real integration works. Because the post dance, how are we bringing this experience back into the 3D world out there with all the normies? How are we receiving? How are we? I mean, integration is just such a great word. How are we integrating everything that we experienced and the messages and what we saw and the feelings and the emotions and everything? How's that coming together as one? And to not be overwhelmed, it's almost a lullaby song, right? We want this lullaby to, okay, now's the time of peace and rest. And on really good playlists that have a really nice landing song, you may notice at dance, there's an extended period of silence. No one wants it, especially happens in the studio. Like, no one wants to say anything. It's just perfectly still. And for me, because I'm playing the didge, I generally match the landing song to the key of the didge that I'm going to bring. But that's my own advantage that I have. But, again, intention is important. Like all of them are named flow, but like this one is called wave table, because you can see it's very wave-like. So that usually comes like if I have the two songs, or if I start working, I'm like, oh, this is called up and down, or this is called something like that. Yeah.
Now, you're familiar with five rhythms, right? How would you say this compares to five rhythms?
Well, they're very similar, right? They're all kind of related. Five rhythms a little more structured, I think, at least as far as the dance experience goes too, right? They got the little leading, got kind of like an instructional movement aspect to it.
Right. A little bit of coaching from the
Yeah.
DJ.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the same is with there's a woman I can't remember. Her name is she led a into contact improv coming into contact class for us, but she does something called the dance church as well. She travels all over the
Oh,
country doing it.
Tess, yeah.
Yeah, Tess. Yeah, and that's again, that's more structured. That's kind of like a class as opposed to what we do is just really free form. Come as you are, move as you want, have an experience. That's kind of that. So the way I have approached my playlist construction is that of the ecstatic dance experience, which, ecstatic has the advantage of live DJ, and it is a co-creation, which the best ecstatics I've ever been to have been co-creation, where the DJ does not have a set agenda. Like I'll
Mm.
give a shout out to DJ Matt Cole. Never miss a Matt Cole set is what I can say because that person is so in tune with the group that's there, and we're driving each other. And that's the same way that I feel that these playlists operate. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Like it makes me immediately think about my own relationship to judgment. And I like on the Myers-Briggs, I'm like 90% perceiver, 10% judge. And that backfires in my life from time to time. But I think it's because I see with my experience that things are hard to define. They're really not exactly the way my mind wants to define them. And so when I stop trying to define things, I have more of this sort of conscious experience of them. And then that conscious experience has tons more information transferred. And so I'm able to adjust and adapt to what's going on, just like you're talking about. If the DJ is not going well, it's got to be this, and but the 30-minute point we've got to have this, and if they're not rigid in their structural approach, then they can feel more of the sort of macro picture of the dance and the community, and be a little more open to the inspiration of that interaction, of that real, like, this is what's happening again. It's this, and this is Valentine's Day, or this Sunday is
Yeah.
Easter, so I'm gonna wrap that theme into here just a little bit, like being more playful, being more conscious, and less mentally judging of what is the right thing to do, allows for incredible surprises and inspiration to enter.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I've talked a lot about structure, but it's really just the build, peak, cruise. That's the only structure. How you play with that. You want peaks every 10 minutes? Go for it. I mean, I've built lists that I think have only had two peaks, and I'll
Mm,
have like a little emotional peak in the middle of a build that is not necessarily, but it's like, oh yeah, ha ha ha. And then that makes it a double build, like a little plateau or something like that. So it's interesting because when I lead sound journeys, which not ironically are 2 hours for the most part, I have no set plan as to what I play. I play maybe 20 different instruments total. People will say, "Well, what are we going to do?" I'm like, "I don't know. What are we going to do? Exactly. What are
mm.
we going to do? Exactly."
Right.
And it's become to where I kind of say jokingly, like, I have no clue what's going to happen, but it's not. It's for me, when a person comes for a sound journey or a group, we talk a little bit, get to know. So just like dance church, over the years, I've talked to people, get to know them, and know their energy. Then I guide people in for meditation, or we just have quiet moments. We connect our energy, and then I tune in, and what comes through, like, go play the didge. Okay, I'm gonna go play the didge. And that person, so what will happen, I'll play all kinds of instruments. People at the end will say, "Oh, when you played this or so and so," I'm like, "I did? Okay. You did this." I said, "I didn't do anything. You were creating with me. You were co-creating. So you're pulling. You needed some sort of X energy from this instrument. I was just there to give it. I don't know why you needed that or whatever." So again, that's a similar way to approach these, is that building them up, and then the experience is the experience, but knowing that we are in it together is important. And like I mentioned earlier, when we use playlists from DJs who are extremely capable and amazing DJs, and sometimes those sets are incredible, Other times they just kind of miss the mark because they don't know us, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of inserting, just like, just listen to this here, which can work and can sometimes not work.
Yeah, so I often for me, and it's like interesting to point out that you often are using lyric songs, not necessarily at the peak, but at the at the at the drop right after the peak, which is cool because people are so in their bodies from the peak that now their mind is receptive to hear some lyrics and integrate something that's not like an actual meaningful lyric, right? Lyrics
Yeah.
that were very intentional for the playlist, not just, well, that's a great song, just happens to be talking about, butt sex. It's
La
like,
la 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 la. Yeah. No.
so just rule of thumb, well, I want to say, I want to finish my thought is that I start singing when I'm sort of blasted off. I'll just start singing with the song that has a voice, whether it's in my language or not. And it's sort of like how my system works with the ecstatic experience. But it's like hearing a voice sort of gives me permission to open my own voice, and join that music audibly. And so I love that. And sometimes it is in the peak. Sometimes the peak
Hmm.
song does have lyrics in it, right? What is your philosophy around lyrics? And I know just like a rule of thumb, Dance Church discourages too many lyrics in a playlist because people don't want to be in their heads
Yeah.
thinking like they normally do. They want to be outside of the default mode network.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So my relationship with lyrics. So jazz has been my. If there's a genre, it's jazz for me. And my partner will joke because sometimes in the morning when we're listening to jazz, something with lyrics will come on. And she'll go, uh-oh, lyrics. No lyrics in jazz. No, not allowed. I'm a bebop person. Get out. Unless your name is Dizzy, I don't want to hear you singing. I've lessened on that stance in my age. But so lyrics in the ecstatic set, yeah, it's, building off of what you shared with that the peak has just blasted you open and then you're in this receptive spot. So for me, I generally put the lyric pieces either on the drops or maybe it's the emotional peak. That might be a lyric piece too, because there it's a little different. You're just kind of being playful, right? A little playful spot. Or at the end with, like, say, that George Harrison song. So for me, first of all, the three lyrics songs that I've got here, we've got Marvin Gaye, we've got Ben Harper, and we've got George Harrison. People who are at the top of their craft, lyrically speaking, writers and expressing themselves. For me, that's important because you mentioned if it's nonsensical lyrics, you know, it's
They
a
don't belong.
distraction. Yeah, they
Right.
don't belong. So one way I look at it is, I've brought you to this peak. I've blasted out all these judgments and whatever, and boom, I stick in my lover's prayer. Most likely, we're not expecting that song or those lyrics, that deepness, and you may have been in a state of ecstasy and just wide open. I like to going back to the mixtape days, right? I'm expressing emotion using someone else's music, someone else's art. So I personally like to try to evoke emotion from other people and push them gently, sorry, not push, gently nudge them into places of maybe where they think it's discomfort, but kind of a judgmental way to look at it, but it's necessary. So you're wide open after that peak. Boom, here comes Marvin Gaye lamenting about this lover who's either passed away or left them, and he's praying that they come back. That because of who he is or was, the lyrics, the structure of the song, placement of the song, maybe you suddenly connect with something emotionally, not necessarily intellectually. That's the initial part of it, right? Because we hear the words and we start to intellectualize a little bit, but then you're in that wide open state and it goes right to your heart mind and something comes up, whether it's in that dance or later. So as far as integration, when I got people on journeys, I often tell them, integration, and this goes for psychedelics, for meditation, everything. Integration can take 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 years, 6 lifetimes. There's no time frame on it. I had someone come who was told something 20 years ago. They went through a sound journey, and only after that sound journey, 20 years after being told something, did they fully integrate it. And they came out and they said, I finally understand why that person gave me that advice 20 years ago. So that's just a beautiful example of you never know when that Marvin Gaye song, after that drop, or in that drop, after you've been energetically and psychically wide open, when that emotional activation will take place. So that's kind of what I go for is emotional activation, right? So we got the Marvin Gaye, we got then Ben Harper right away singing that as long as you love me, I love you. What more do we need? And then George Harrison at the end using words of Baba Ram Dass saying, just be here now. There's nothing else in this moment right now, especially after this emotional, a good ecstatic or a good dance church playlist is very emotional. Again, whether you feel it, whether you're sobbing in the park like I've done many times, or whether you go home and 3 days later you're suddenly like, I'm releasing from all of that I just experienced. So, being careful with the message, because again, if we're talking about booty sex in the middle of a song, it's probably not kind of fitting for this 11:30 in the morning in the park
Right.
with us middle-aged folk, but it might. Yeah, so just being very careful with it. And of course, these are personal playlists for me and anyone crafting them. So if that song connects with you personally for some very significant reason, if you're working through something and maybe you're expressing in this playlist, then you can use it. I mean, again, transitions and in the flow of the whole thing, where does it fit? Does it work there? Is it disruptive? Are you trying to be disruptive? It's a great question because it's difficult to really have one hard and fast rule for it.
Right.
Because as I mentioned, the only real rule is arrival, build, peak, cruise, slow down, cool down, landing.
Yeah.
Some combination thereof. And just because I use drops after cruises doesn't mean, I mean, I don't necessarily always do that. Sometimes it's just a little bit of a slowdown and then we go up. Like I mentioned, it's not necessarily always this. It's sometimes a little plateau and then a big drop. Yeah, because if you're manipulating the energy, interesting word, manipulating, guiding the energy. Yeah, you
Well,
might want to.
I feel like there's nothing negative about that. To me, I show up as a dancer. I want the DJ to puppeteer me. That's what I'm there for. I want the experience and the depth of the experience that DJ is trying to give me. And so I'm putty, I'm a puppet ready to be danced.
Putty. That I like that putty analogy because that's exactly what it is, right? We want to be there so we don't have to use our mind and we don't have to use judgment to say, I wouldn't have put this song there, or this is not. We want to just be fluid, just allow it to, again, flow. I go back to that flow thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to think, excuse me, I don't want to have to find the rhythm, just let the rhythm carry me, or let the lyrics carry me, or the instrument.
Wonderful. Well, I think this is probably plenty. This is great. If there's anything else that you want to add, if there's something else that you didn't get to say that you think is important.
I think spending time in the community is important if you want to craft a playlist. I've had some people say to me, oh, I'd like to make a playlist, and they've been to like one dance, which, okay, maybe, but for me, like I mentioned, sometimes I'm putting in a song because I'm thinking of a specific person or a group of people or a moment like, oh, well, we had this joke a few weeks ago or something like that, and, put it in there. Ooh, I might have given away something about my next playlist.
No, but I like that. Like I like that, and like I've been to other dances, and in dance church, it seems like in particular, frequently there's some point around near the third, usually near the third peak, where most of all the dancers are like in a frickin' circle, just totally spontaneously, organically happen. And they're all looking at each other. And a lot of these people have known each other for years and years. And it's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that just like primal, tribe of warriors just, ceremonially spinning up the spirit and go, rah!
Yeah, yeah. And again, so that's like you said, this is an advantage that we have of being together for so long, right? You want to get that, you want to guide people to that moment. Okay, well, if I'm going to guide to a big circle, I know that if I use X song from this genre, it's our group, they're not going to respond to it. I might like this song that's got certain aspects to it, but I know the wider group, they're not going to connect with it. So even if I build the energy, it's likely that that circle won't happen so organically, just because of song choice and knowing tastes amongst there, and I absorb. I always, as I rarely share in the closing circle, but I'm always listening, and through osmosis, just stockpiling, making. I'm a list person. So one thing to know is that when I start building a playlist, I mentioned I have that repository of songs, or I hear songs. So I'll hear a song and I'll say, oh, okay, yeah, put it on the next flow 12. So that goes on for a while, to the point where, generally speaking, when I'm ready to edit or craft or really shape it, I've got 4.5 hours of music in the Flow 12 playlist. It's 4 hours, 26 minutes long. Maybe the first 15 minutes are all arrival pieces. I was listening to classical that day or something, and I dumped them all in there. So then I start to whittle things down. Like I'll go through and say, okay, this has to be the first song. I really like that. So you move that to the top. And then you start from there. And eventually you go from 4.5 hours down to the 2 hours. 2 hours and 3 minutes usually for me, but I don't get in trouble. But that's important is to,
Longer crossfade helps a little bit.
yeah, exactly. Pump that crossfade up to 12 seconds, and then you multiply your number of songs by 12 seconds, and you take out that time. Um, so it's important, I think, especially in the when you're first making playlists, not try and only have 2 hours of music that are perfectly structured right when you're putting stuff in there. Just lump it all in. And maybe you've got like 16 peak songs in there, and you just have to go through the process of whittling them out. And that helps you pay attention to transitions. Sometimes the theme of the playlist will come through, but that's usually where it happens, is like I'll have one or two songs I know I want in there, and I'm building, and then as I'm starting to write out my list, I put my subtitle under, like, oh, wave table or triple peak or something like that. So, not limiting yourself right away. Just to borrow a commercial phrase, just do it. Just dump the stuff in there and then come back to it. Yeah, and whittle it out, and then you can start moving things around like that.
Nice.
So
Nice.
just having fun with it. And that's why it's important to dance to it yourself. Because if you can't have fun with it dancing, or you can't have an experience with dancing, then 9 times out of 10, a group of 20 or 25 is also not going to connect with it. And if you feel while dancing to it, then you're spot on. And pay attention to those transitions and design it to the crossfade. If 10 seconds is not working, bump it up to 12. And as you build more and more sets, you begin to understand. You hear it in other playlists. Like if there's a crossfade where, that's why sometimes I don't put two songs with drums like the djembes together, because you get that moment where the two, the crossfade works like this, where at some point they intersect, and then you get this weird sort of rhythm, and then it flows, and then it smooths out to the next song. So little things like that you start to notice as you pay more and more attention to it and listen. That's the biggest thing I say, is just listen to a lot of music, all kinds of genres, just all over the place.
Yeah. Thank you so much, buddy.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
is great.